Hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Empowered to Live. I am your host, Andrew Rose Butler, and our podcast is about where faith meets purpose and purpose fuels freedom. And today we are wrapping up our four-part series on building a strong sense of purpose. We all know that, I am all about finding your purpose, living in purpose, I'm in being able to inspire, encourage, motivate you to find your purpose. Like, why were you created? And today, for me, it's kind of where we live. It's talking about finding the ministry of the mundane, finding purpose in your everyday life. Because that's where we live right now. We live in the everyday, the getting up, the going to work, the, cooking, the cleaning, the doing laundry, the, going to church, getting gas. All of those things are part of our routine. It's part of the how we live our lives. And sometimes I feel that we can get caught up in the mundane things and miss the ministry that we have in those times, in those moments of our lives, that we can sometimes miss out on what God has for us in those moments. And as I was thinking about this, I saw a movie a long time ago, been a few years now, and every now and then I try to find it. And it was called The Miracle of Everyday, of the Ordinary, excuse me, of Ordinary Days. It was The Miracle of Ordinary Days. And it's set in World War II. And um, this young lady, basically, she found herself pregnant by a soldier who, when she came, she thought he loved her, and she, found herself in the family way, as they would say. And so her family shipped her off to this town, and basically she became somewhat like a mail order bride. It was like, this single man lives in this town. He's willing to marry you and willing to take on, the responsibility of being a father to this child, even though it's not his. And so, they lived in the house where, she didn't know how to cook. She didn't know how to clean. She didn't know how to do any of those things, but she tried. And it was in those moments of doing the ordinary stuff, her learning how to cook, her learning how to clean, how to make beds, how to do all these different things, and him teaching her and this growing in all those things, that their relationship developed, and how it transformed her, and how she was able to affect the lives of these Japanese family that was basically um, locked up during that period, where they lost their homes. And so she was able to meet these sisters, and to help them, and even to capture a German prisoner of war that was here. And I guess in California, they had some prisoners here and whatever, and he was attempting to. So you got to go see the movie. It's a really good movie. It's very clean, family friendly movie, mostly for adults. Um, but it was a good movie, and it just reminds us that in everyday life there are miracles, and that we can make impact by doing what we think is mundane or routine, or I'm just changing diapers, I'm just going to get gas, I'm running errands, I'm doing all those different things. But can you find a miracle in those things? That God gives us opportunities, even in the small things, we can make a big impact. So it's not, always about, the glamorous, the big stuff that we do. It's not about flashy. It's not unnecessarily always public, the things that we do. It could be, paying it forward, opening the door for someone as you're going into the store, saying hi to the cashier, speaking, lending a hand, and so in all of these ways and spaces and places, we have opportunity to make an impact. And so, Colossians 3:23 reminds us that whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as if working for the Lord. So whatever it is that you're doing, even if it's something that you're like, oh, I hate this, do it as unto the Lord. and when you, and then out of that, we can worship God in the mundane things of our lives. So, one of the ways we can do that, and everything we do matters to God. So that's the other piece that we need to remember, that we matter to Him, and whatever we do matters to Him. And like I said, we may consider it to be small, but we don't know the lasting impact that we can have on people's lives. And I share this a lot. Where we live here, we go walking, and whether it was walking in our neighborhood or going up to the park and walking, people were watching. And they always talk about, oh, we see you, and we don't know who was watching you and how you interact with the people. So we will see them, people, we're like, good morning, good afternoon, whatever. We go into the mercado, the market, and we speak. Somebody behind us in line, and people are, I share that people are always so friendly, and they're always speaking, and it's part of the culture to be like, good day, good afternoon, good night, all those things and greeting. And for them to see our attempts and not realizing, that we don't necessarily see the people, but the people see us. And so here it is that we're just thinking we're just walking around the park, just, walking around the neighborhood, trying to get our exercise in, and people were watching. And they's like, we saw you, and we saw your kindness. We saw, how, even into, when people cleaning in the restaurants, or when we're in the hospital, the people sweeping the hallways, a lot of times, we overlook janitorial staff. We just seem, oh, they're just cleaning. But you don't know what impact you can have by just saying, because I see people walk past them all the time, even in their old culture where, you speak, and they'll speak to everyday people, but a lot of times they won't speak to the cleaning people. Why not? I'm always, and I see them, they come by, I'm walking past them, and I'm like, good afternoon. I did it in the States, and I do it here because I'm not going to change who I am. And so you speak, and you don't know, and sometimes you just see their face light up with the fact that somebody saw me. And we don't know, like I said, the impact we have when we just, in those ordinary things, when we see people, when we can make such a big difference, while you're changing that diaper, singing over your children. My kids still talk about some of the stuff that I did, but I thought it was just, I was just being a mom. But the way you do it as unto the Lord makes a big difference. When you're taking the trash out, are you singing songs, or are you complaining? Are you murmuring, or are you upset about the fact that you have to do that? And so one of the things we can do when we're looking at our lives and the mundane things, the ordinary things, the stuff that we think, oh, here I go again. I have to do this. And I've said this before, that we don't say I have to do this. I get to do it. I get to cook, because somebody's out there who doesn't have food to eat, and they don't know where their meal is going to come from. I get to clean my house because somebody is homeless, wishing they had a home. And so I get to clean my house. I get to have children because of the fact somebody has been praying for a child and cannot have one for whatever reason, can't have children. And so when we look at it and we reframe that whole mindset change, and go back and look at the series I did on mindset. When we change our minds about the way we see things, the way we do things, the way we feel about it, and we reframe it, and not saying, oh, I hate this. I have to go to work. Somebody's looking for a job and can't find one. I wish they had a job. Even the job that you hate, somebody's wishing they had a job. And so, you get to go to work. I get to clean my house. Somebody can't move. Somebody can't speak. Somebody doesn't have the mind, and they're wishing they're trapped in their bodies, and wishing they could do the things that you get to do every day. And so when we think about that, somebody lost a spouse, and their children is gone, and they're looking at all these things. We don't live in a war-torn area, any of those things. And so we get to live here. We get to do those things. And so just kind of remind us to be in a reframe sometimes, and in that small reframe of how we present and how we see our lives makes the biggest difference, because it does change our attitudes. So remember that the ordinary often sets the stage for the extraordinary. David was tending sheep when God called him. And I think about that, David tending sheep. Moses was also tending sheep. So it's those things when we think about it, shepherds were like the lowest caste of people. They weren't, they were smelly. They were kind of the lowest. They were filthy. And then we see that even with Jesus, these shepherds were tending their flock by night when the angel came to them. And so they were doing what nobody wanted to do. And you may feel that you're in this space where you're doing stuff that nobody wants to do. And you're like, oh, I hate this job. I hate this marriage. Sometimes I can't stand my kids, whatever. And so look at it as this, or you feel like, my job is insignificant. I'm here flipping burgers, or, I'm waiting tables, or whatever it is that you find yourself in. How can you switch that up and allow God to do the extraordinary in your life, in the moment that you're in the space that you're in? Can you be the best at what you're doing? Because you never know what stage you're setting for God to do extraordinary things in you. Release the pressure. You know, purpose is not about performance. I've said this before. It's not about us performing, but it's just about living. I've shared before that, before I officially became a life purpose coach, I was helping people walk in their purpose, you know, giving, just directing people, encouraging, motivating, guiding them into different things. And, well, what if this happens? Or, and hold them accountable to doing what they said they were going to do. And I've seen it played out in the accomplishment of people in their lives and what they're doing. And so I was just doing that because that's how I felt like was one of my purpose, again, about encouraging just in the routine stuff. My kids would bring their friends home and we'll start having conversations and whatever, and they would bring up something and we're like, okay, well, have you thought about this? And what's holding you back? And in those routine of just sitting at this table with my kids' friends, having a conversation made all the difference and the impact that we have. So it's not about performance, it's just being yourself. And sometimes it's just simply showing up faithful in the moment that you're in. Be authentic, be real, and just show up. And sometimes it's in the showing up and showing up as our authentic self, showing up, having joy. And there's stuff people ask me at work, why don't you complain when stuff happens? Why? Is complaining going to change the situation? No. And then also I'm like, as long as it's not illegal, it's not immoral, or any of those things that's going to push me out of purpose, I don't care. It's job. They said do this, okay, fine. What do you need me to do within the confines of this work that's not going to push my faith? It's not going to cause me to compromise, my faith in God. As long as we're not doing any of those things, you're not telling me to lie, steal, it's work. Just do it. And again, it was that attitude of reframing. I get to have a job. I may not always agree with what they were doing, and I agree with the changes, but I was like, what, God, I'm doing this as unto you, not unto man. This is what they want me to do. This is what I get to do. This is what I'm going to do. I want to keep it going. I want to keep it pushing. I'm not going to murmur and complain or any of those things about the changes that they make, because it doesn't make a difference. If they say this is now part of the scope of your work, this is part of the scope of my work. Can we have a conversation about it? If I'm feeling like now I'm in the press and it was like, there's no way for me to be able to balance these and give you a good product, then we need to have a conversation. Otherwise, if I can do it, if it's a change, work is work, and we just keep it pushing. And so release that pressure, show up, just be you, be that ambassador, demonstrate the love, kindness, whatever those things are. And so in those mundane things, we can turn that into worship in our everyday. Can you find joy in what you're doing? So it's not just about singing on Sunday mornings. Maybe it's while you're doing the laundry. I told you about that. We talked about that about task stacking, where you're brushing your teeth and, you can exercise. You can do some exercise, some stretching, whatever. You can pray while you're cooking and, sing songs. They used to laugh at me at work because sometimes they'll have a whole concert by myself. And it was like, what you singing? And it was like, you're always singing because it helps me. I love music and I love singing. So here we go. And it got me through my day. So can you worship while you're folding laundry? Can you worship while you're sweeping the floor? Put on some Thai tribute or any of those things and dance around your house and find joy in that. You know, get the kids involved if you need to, if you've got young kids at home, and try to pull everybody in, and because they're watching you and they're seeing how you handle the life that happens to you and around you, and when you're again demonstrating to them how to find joy in things that seems crazy, you know, and how to make impact in the middle of the mundane, the ordinary, um, whatever it is. Can you still find joy? Can you worship God in the middle of all of those things, and allow Him to then elevate you to the place He wants you to do? Because it's about being faithful over the little. We quote that all the time, that He make you rule over the much, and we think about that in the forms of we're going to have this grand things, and major things are going to happen, but it's in the small ordinary things that when we start finding joy in the little things, then we can find joy in the big things. And then it also translates into when we're facing difficult times, if you know how to worship in the good times, it translates into you worshiping and being able to find joy when things don't work out as they should. When you're having one of those days, we live here in Mexico, and they're creatures, and it's kind of like yesterday, who we were maybe just coming from the store, we were doing something, and my youngest daughter, she was like, "Oh my God!" And I was like, "What?" And there was a scorpion in the house. Um, and even though she about emptied a whole can of spray on the scorpion, we were able to find joy even in the fact that, yes, it scared us, and we're like, okay, new fear unlocked, scorpions in the house. But then we were laughing about that, and it was like, okay, first it was a tarantula in the house, and now we got scorpions in the house. We still got the lizards in the house, and so how can you, even in those moments, find joy in that? We're like, okay, thank you, God. We were able to see that it didn't bite us or any of those things. She's got open-toed shoes on, and all these different things, and we just go about doing life, and then stuff happens that could have been potentially dangerous. But we were able to laugh, and we were just cracking up about this, and we're just like, okay, God, here we go. It's making the day better. I was like, you better think, how can that possibly be better? There's a whole scorpion in your house. But it was, and it was funny, and we were able to laugh about it, and just crack up about how she reacted to actually seeing the scorpion in the house, and we were just laughing, and it changed, it shifted focus of this day didn't start out the way we had planned it. And then here's the scorpion in the house now. So my oldest was like, "Oh, it just gets better. This day can't get any more better than this." And we were just laughing, And so, how do you find and put joy into the situations that should brought you to tears, but find happiness and laughter and joy in those moments? Where can you find your rainbow? In the middle of whatever it is you're going through, and those ordinary, mundane, simple things of life that you think, oh, this is this, I'm here we go, time to make the donuts, and getting up, making breakfast, getting the kids ready, doing laundry, cleaning the floor, mopping this, gotta clean the bathroom, gotta do this, gotta run to the store. Where can you put God in the middle of that and allow Him to turn your ordinary into an extraordinary? And so we can worship in that, and that God, it becomes our ministry to our children, to our neighbors, to our families, to the stranger, when you're able to show up and bring a smile to somebody's face, even, when you unintentionally, you can just be one of those people that are happy. And if you're not, learn to look for, like I said, look for the rainbow, look for ways to find joy in some of those things that, should, should bring you to tears. Is there something that you can find joy in? Is there a kernel of things that you can laugh about it? My friend is getting ready to have surgery in next week, as a matter of fact, and she posted, she was just like, weird thought in the middle of all of this craziness. And I was even talking to her yesterday, and I was just like, I love your comment that you said, she's going to have a double mastectomy. She's got cancer again for like the third time. And she was able to, she was like dark humor, and be able to find something. And we were just cracking up yesterday on the phone, and just thinking about, yes, it's a serious thing, but we were able to find, even in the middle of this, here is her third round of, different kinds of cancer, twice with breast cancer, one with lung cancer, and so, here we go now. And so, can we find joy in it? It's not funny, but we found joy, we found humor in it. We were able to talk about it and laugh about stuff, about even, this the craziness of how things will be. And like I said, even in a serious situation, can you find a kernel of joy, a kernel of hope for you, and turn that kernel into a plant that's going to sustain somebody else in their journey, as you walk in the purpose that you were called to do. So don't overlook the small things. God works in the ordinary to bring about extraordinary, and your everyday obedience is a ministry called by itself. So God is calling us to ministry, even in the little stuff. You don't have to be ordained or licensed or any of those things to be able to minister to someone. That is basically being a servant. And like I said, whether it's opening the door for somebody, whether it's giving a smile, whether, it's helping someone, whether it's bringing a meal, whether it's cleaning your house, whether it's taking care of the kids, or any of those things, or in your marriage and relationships with your friends and family. How can you look at those things and find a ministry out of that God can use to bring about his purpose here on the earth? And so, that wraps up this 4-part series that we had on building a strong sense of purpose. In week 1, we talked about, resetting your life direction. How can we reset and find purpose when life gives us those detours? We start over from a setback. When things don't always go the way that we think they should. How are we able to bounce back and to come back stronger? Just like working muscles. Found myself last week coming up. I was going to do some ab work. I hadn't done ab work in a minute, and oh my God, the pain. And then my daughter was just like, she said to me, she's like, that means the muscles were working, but you can't allow it to stop you from keep pushing. And so I had to remind myself, yes, it hurts now, but it's not going to hurt always. I'm going to get stronger. And so I'm going to come back, and it's going to be better, because it's going to help me overall, as I age, with my posture and all this stuff. But so I had to remind myself again with that reframing. Yes, it hurts now because I hadn't worked those muscles. And so I'm going to come back stronger after I finish doing some working out. And so that's where we are with the power of community. Why it matters that we are in community. When we help each other, we encourage and support each other because of our community. When we come together, and community doesn't look the same for everyone. And we talk about building and finding your community and allowing your community to find you. And then today, as we wrap up in the ministry of the Mundane, we find a miracle in our ordinary days that's going to help us to push us further and closer to purpose. When we recognize that, it's not about the flashy, it's about the simple, it's about tending sheep so that God sees you being faithful in that arena. So whether your tending sheep looks like changing diapers, whether that tending sheep, mean going to work and showing up um, joyful, helpful, being kind, compassionate, whatever that looks like, whether, it's smiling and saying good morning, greeting people when you see them, if people allow you. And if they don't, I'm also a proponent of that as well. It's not about their reaction, but it's about, I'm not going to change my personality and who I am just because somebody doesn't necessarily, say hello back. I've had that experience where people didn't speak back, and I work. And I was just like, good morning. Every time I saw them, good morning, good afternoon. Whenever I saw them, they didn't speak. And then one day I just had my brain was just someplace else. And they were like, you're not going to speak to me today. And I was just like, what? You never respond back. I didn't even know that you even heard me or that you cared. And then one time I did this person was like, you're not going to speak to me today. And I was like, but you don't talk to me. But I was just, my brain was just someplace else. I was in thought and I wasn't even paying attention. I didn't really see them because of what was going on in my mind. And so, we don't know again about impact in the small things that we do. And so I pray that this series has reminded you the purpose is out there somewhere in the future. It's here. It's in your reset. It's in your setback. It's in the people that you're in community with, and it's in your ordinary days of doing. And so, if this series has blessed you, share it with a friend. Leave a comment, and let us continue building our lives of faith, freedom, and purpose together. So, thank you all for joining me. And next week, we'll start a new series talking about limitations, and we were talking about breaking up with limitations is going to be our new series for October. What are some of the things that limit us? Like procrastination and all those different things that hold us back. And so, stay tuned for that. And if you want to catch the full series on, this building a strong sense of purpose, you can check us out on YouTube. So we are there. You can watch all of the videos that are out there, even some of the older ones. We have been tracking now, and I'm so excited about where we are on the growth that we have. Also we have our newsletter. If you're not receiving that and you would like to receive our newsletter, you can go to the website and sign up for the newsletter as well, so you can get that. We send it out weekly, and this is basically taken. So you have like a hard copy or a digital copy of what we've talked about in the past weeks, and so you will come out. So each of the weeks that we have, I break them out and send those out weekly. So you'll have that, and each one has a challenge or journal prompts for you. And so the challenge for you in this week is look for ways that you can make an impact doing ordinary things. Whether you are running errands, whether it's doing laundry, can you find joy in that? Can you touch somebody's life and make a difference, while you're running errands, whatever it is that you're doing, look for the ways that you're making impact. Ask your family also, what are some of the things that you do that you may think it's nothing, and they're like, I love when you do this, so ask your family, check in with them, and then just, keep being motivated and inspired, to find the miracles in your ordinary day. Thank you all again for joining me for another episode of Empowered to Live. Again, I will see you all next week. Have a wonderful night and enjoy your weekend.